I've got a daughter, she's 12 now. And, if I think of what I'm doing now when I was my daughter's age, I mean, this job never existed when I was younger. I just think now when my daughter's going to be 20, 25, what's she going to be doing? Because it's going to be a completely different industry by that point.
Behind every Microsoft partner is a story of growth, a story of ambition, and a story of people pushing themselves, their businesses, and technology further. Every week here on Microsoft Mentors, the podcast, I speak to business, technology, and thought leaders from across the Microsoft partner ecosystem, offering mentorship at scale to the Microsoft partner community. So let's dive into this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. And today I am really pleased to be joined by James Pearse. How you doing, James?
Yeah, really good. Nice to meet you, Ollie. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, no problem at all. James, for anyone that doesn't know you, it'd be good if you could just give us a quick 15-second rundown on where you work, what your role is, who you are, if that's okay.
Yeah, so as you kindly introduced, so I'm James Pearse, so I'm the Chief Technology Officer at ATEC Cloud. More recently part of the IMARC group about 15, 16 months ago, and I'm responsible for our kind of technical strategy as an organisation, the operational teams as well reporting to me, and just managing our kind of Microsoft relationship and what we do with those guys over there. Nice.
And we'll dive into a bit more about ATEC and what you've been doing there over the last 3 or 4 years a bit later on. But I always like to ground these conversations in the person, in you and sort of your background and where you've come from. And I've done, we're coming towards the end of series 3 now. So we're probably up to sort of nearly 30 people on Microsoft Mentors. And it's always really interesting to see where people started. And there's actually normally quite a lot of similarities across people and where they started in the industry. But I guess for you, James, with even before you started work, was technology always a cornerstone of your childhood? Were you always interested in it, or did you fall into it?
Really good question. I've always been interested in technology, but I wouldn't necessarily say when I was younger it was something that I thought I'd get into as a career. In actual fact, I pretty much fell into it. But actually, I've always kind of aspired. I'm quite kind of career-minded, and I've always aspired to do better. And I'm just lucky enough that I've landed in situations at the right time, enabled to me to kind of grow my career really over the last 20 odd years.
Yeah. So what was your route into work? Did you go to university? Did you do apprenticeships? What did that look like for you?
No. So actually, university was something that I actually always wanted to do. And unfortunately, my parents got divorced when I was sort of 16. So I had to change schools when I was just started my A-levels. So I had to go to a different school, had to do different A-levels, and they weren't the ones that I really wanted to do. So I would argue really in secondary school, especially in A-levels, I didn't do as well as I could have. And when I left school, I was planning on going traveling, and that didn't turn out as I expected, because there was a friend I was going to go with that ended up doing something else. So I kind of fell into work pretty much straight away. So when I was about 19, I started working for a company which was a logistics company at the time, still is a logistics company. And I started working as like an IT just admin in one of their regional offices that was next to where I lived. And I spent about 3 or 4 years there, and I kind of worked my way up through the different jobs within the team, and I ended up being like one of the sort of youngest systems administrators on the site. And it was a fully automated kind of warehouse. So it was all run by like a big Unix platform. Got to work on a lot of kind of the early AS400 stuff. Did a lot of like simple things like tape changing and all that stuff as well. And then I saw a role to move into their central IT team, and that was down near Bristol. So I applied for that and luckily got the role. So that moved me out of a single unit into more of a regional support offering. So I came in as a junior systems administrator back when I was 23. And over the next sort of 3, 4, 5 years, worked my way up into sort of becoming a proper systems administrator, then an engineer, then I became a project engineer. And just before the credit crunch in 2008, the company that I worked for, Wincanton at the time, were buying up lots of other European providers. So I got the opportunity to go over, because I put my hand up, I was young enough and, didn't have a family at the time. I was interested in like understanding how stuff works. I went and go and shut down other depots and amalgamated all of their IT centrally, and really enjoyed it. But when the credit crunch hit in 2008, 2009, everybody sort of stopped spending. And the company that I worked for at the time didn't really, it sort of stopped promoting from within. All our projects were kind of shut down, really. It was just kind of keeping the lights on. And I did that for about another year and a half. And I thought, I've got to go and do something different. And at that time, I'd started working with a couple of contractors. And their advice to me was go and get out into the kind of partner ecosystem, go and work for a reseller or an ISV or a systems integrator, and get in that way. So I left in 2010 and I joined a company in Cheltenham, a company called Commercial, which was absolutely brilliant for me. Like amazing sort of leadership, a great mentor. Our CTO at the time, a guy called Mark Freeman, was phenomenal. And I came in, started doing engineering, so for project engineers, going out and doing kind of sort of migrations of SANs and Citrix migrations and deployments, and Windows Server builds, etc., AD migrations, that kind of stuff. But I've always been good with people, always good talking to people, and they saw that quite quickly. So very quickly I got into a pre-sales role. So I started working directly with customers, like helping build out engagements and commercial models, etc. Then I became the head of pre-sales, and then I became the head of technology. And then around 2015, I remember it vividly because it was a really cold morning. I think it was snowing at the time. And I used to work with a recruiter that I used to get, I'd speak to him regularly about bringing people into commercial from an IT perspective. And he rang me one day and said, actually, I want to talk to you. And he said, I've got a role that might be quite interesting. He goes, it's quite kind of left field, but it's working in the Caribbean. So I was like, oh, okay. So I took a role doing some contracting over there, building out a private cloud for a couple of legal companies. So moved to Grand Cayman for a year with my family, and my daughter was only sort of 14 months old at the time. And that was amazing. Like, again, got to see a different sort of part of the world, just a whole different way that kind of the business is run over there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
big decision that, though, I guess, wasn't it? I've worked with a client over in the Grand Cayman Islands as well, very, very similar in terms of, taking UK talent over to the Cayman Islands. And whilst it all sounds very ideal, it's a big shift, isn't it, to go, right, I'm going to pick my whole family up and move them to the other side of the world. So what were those conversations like when you went back to the other half and said, we've got an opportunity for us to go to the Caribbean? How did that one land to start with?
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, we kind of sat down, and by default, you always think of all the reasons why you can't do something, but you don't necessarily focus on what is actually stopping us from doing it. We were still fairly young, obviously had a young family, but we were like, actually, so it's a great opportunity. So between all of us, we made that kind of decision to do it. And we loved our time over there. The reason why we came back is that my wife's dad was taken ill, and she wanted to be back at home to make sure that she was obviously near him. So we came back after about a year. And that was really when I got into where we kind of are now, which was the early rise of kind of public cloud. I got an opportunity to join a company in London, a systems integrator called Systems Up, which is like one of the first sort of early systems integrators in London, working predominantly with sort of public sector organisations. So parliamentary digital services. We did a load of work early on HS2 and some other things as well. But that was the first kind of like, wow, like this is what's coming. This is what's like what really interested me, and got really started to work then closely with Microsoft. because we were part of some of the early programs that they were using to get kind of Azure out into the public, which was the Azure Everywhere program. So
Yeah.
got working a lot with Microsoft sellers in the UK, specifically out of Reading, doing loads of sort of public sector conversations with customers, 3-day workshops on why you should go to public cloud. And I did probably about sort of 10, 11, 12 of those with some good conversion rates. And they ended up actually saying to me, why don't you come and work for us? And whilst I love what I did at Systems Up, you know, when Microsoft sort of says that to you, you don't really sort of turn it down. So
No.
at that point, I made the decision to leave Systems Up and go and join Microsoft in the UK.
Yeah, and Systems Up, they were acquired in the end by IMART as well, wasn't it?
They were, which is, and it's very interesting because I feel like a boomerang that's kind of gone literally all the way around back again.
Yeah. That's IMART's acquisition policy. It's find out where James is.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly that.
And I guess if we sort of unpick some of that stuff, so it sounds like early on in your career during that sort of Wincanton phase, it was very much learning on the job by the sounds of it. So progression, developing, moving, different regions, acquisition. So I guess in those early years, how did you handle that sort of, you know, right, we've now acquired this company, they've got X technical infrastructure and landscape. You may or may not have sort of been involved with the technologies that were within those organizations. So how did you deal with that sort of technology learning on the job side of things?
I mean, I was quite lucky to have, I worked with some really good people. But also, I think a lot of it came down to the fact that I was always willing to put myself forward. There was a lot of people within the organisation that, for whatever reason, didn't want to go and travel, didn't want to go and do other things, or sort of step outside their comfort zone. But I've always been somebody that is happy to do that, because I am ultimately always trying to sort of strive to do better. So, you know, even on some of those early days where I was doing sort of new technologies, you know, I had a good group of people around me, but I would also, you know, study, you know, the internet was still very much in its kind of infancy, but I could still find information that I needed. I'd lab something the day before, or I'd play around with something before I went in to go and I'd speak to somebody within the business or do something live, just to make sure that I was aware of what I should and shouldn't be doing. But I think if you put the time and effort in, you'll always get the rewards at the end. I think that's how I've always been throughout my entire career. Really, is don't be afraid to step up and don't be afraid to put effort in, because ultimately you'll get the rewards out the back of it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, you know, another sort of pivot point by the looks of it was leaving Wincanton and stepping over, like you said, into that IT service ecosystem, whether it's, you know, for a lot of people, it could be Microsoft partner or consultancy. And I always find with a lot of people in their careers, those pivot points do come where maybe they have spent, you know, a good chunk of their early career working in one or two internal roles, and they've got that appetite to go and work in the customer facing external world, but it is a very different beast, right? How did you deal with going from maybe, you know, dealing with the pace and the expectations of internal stakeholders to all of a sudden, you know, Mr. Customer is paying for James's time, and you know, there's commercial outcomes for both the MSP Microsoft partner, but also the end client at stake as well. So how did you make that shift from being internal to the consultancy world?
Yeah, a really good question, and you're 100% right. I mean, the pressure like changed overnight, because when you're working on internal projects or initiatives, you know, if something slips, all right, it's not the end of the world. But when you're doing it for a customer that's paying, and you know, if you go over time and you can't be used for something else, that's completely sort of different sort of pressure. And actually, you know, to begin with, it was quite overwhelming. You know, literally finishing a project on a Friday, going and starting something brand new on a Monday, and even sometimes going in and working with something that I'd never worked with before. Which is like the old ways of kind of, you know, value-added resellers of just chucking people in and to do stuff. But again, you know, commercial was great because there was a lot of really good people in there that would always give you the time and work with you and support you. And but again, I would always do stuff at night. I'd always look something up. If I was going to go and do a Citrix migration on a Monday, the weekend I'd be swatting up on what I needed to do and what I needed to kind of approach it with. But I always think as well, it's how you, and even up to where I am now, it's how you portray yourself as well. So even though sometimes internally you might be like panicking and paddling at a million miles an hour, it's the face that you put on, and it's how you kind of articulate yourself to either a customer or an internal stakeholder that ultimately you've got to put their mind at rest, even if you are fretting behind the scenes. How am I going to do this? Because if you show that view, they're quickly they're going to lose faith in you, and you're going to lose credibility. So I think that's a skill that I've built up over the years, being able to kind of, even though behind the scenes you're panicking, oh God, how are we going to do this? Like, you've got to put this face on. And I think even more so when you get into more like higher leadership roles where you've got an entire organization that's kind of looking up to you and what you're doing, you need to be able to portray that this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is how we're going to do it. I think that methodology is kind of key.
Yeah, definitely. I think the answer is never no or I don't know, is it? In the consultancy world, it's let me take a look at that, or we'll come back to you once we've done some more discovery.
You know too well, Ollie.
Oh dear. And I guess that move to Microsoft sort of post systems up. Whilst I guess the commercial role and the systems up role is sort of to build those more senior advisory capabilities. It looks like the role at Microsoft was really sort of a real dive into that and working strategically with businesses and organizations to help them on that Microsoft agenda then longer term.
Exactly that. So when I joined Microsoft, I think I joined in the June, and then obviously Microsoft every year, anybody that works with Microsoft or in the know with Microsoft, they go through changes every year. They change the way they're structured, they change the way they're operating, and that first year was quite significant because they brought in the customer success team into the UK. And actually I started and went straight into that function. So I predominantly worked with public sector organisations at that point. So I was aligned with the Ministry of Defence, and I live not too far from Bath now. So Horsham was the nearest place to me, and also the Welsh Government. So working with those two customers quite closely on their transformation projects / how can they unlock the value of the cloud. So again, it was still early cloud, so it's not as advanced as it is even now, but back then we were doing some huge pieces of work, and had some really good successes with the Ministry of Defence, and more so with the Welsh Government as well. Their adoption of public cloud was huge, and we had some really good kind of wins from that. And I enjoyed that part of it. The one thing I missed, and this is part and parcel of going to work for an organisation like Microsoft, is Microsoft puts you into a pigeonhole when you kind of get these defined swim lanes that you need to operate within. And at that time, I was a CSA in the UK team. Yes, you go and work with customers, but you don't step too far or fray too far out of those swim lanes. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I was used to, and probably where I thrived the most. And I got a real chance opportunity within Microsoft, because a guy that I used to work with had just moved over into a brand new team, which was called the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. That's now rebranded to Elevate, but back then it was basically like a startup in Microsoft. So Microsoft realized that kind of global non-profits, NGOs, were really being underserved from a Microsoft perspective, because up to that point, they would fit either randomly within public sector or within local government. There was no cohesive unit that brought together worldwide all of those different departments, but also brought together kind of Microsoft offers, services, solutions, built out IP on their own platforms to kind of self-serve them more. So I remember I was chatting to a guy, Jamie Bryant was the guy I worked with at the time, and he said to me, there's a role that's just opened up. I'll have a word for you and see what happens. So Jamie had a word, and the CTO of Microsoft TSI then contacted me. So he was based over in Redmond. Had a chat with him. He said, apply and we'll have a conversation. So I applied, and ended up being successful, and ended up being the sort of technology lead for the United Nations globally, which again was mental considering where I'd started, all those years ago, where I was at that point. And that was, even to this day, those first 9 months are probably the best 9 months I've ever had in my entire career, because I was I was dropped into a very new unit in the whole Microsoft ecosystem. It was, you had to wear lots of different hats, which is what I'm really good at doing anyway, I think. But also it was, they trusted you, if that made sense as well. And that sounds really simple and stupid, but they trusted you to do the right thing. So it's kind of like, right, I need you to go off and speak to that person. Yeah. And I was just left to do that. And again, very quickly, we had some really good kind of wins. I obviously traveled quite extensively in that first sort of 9 to 10 months.
A few flights in and out of Geneva and places like that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I was probably in Geneva probably at least once or twice a month. I also went to Rome as well quite a few times because they've got some of the organisations over there, like World Food Programme, etc. New York as well. Went there several times. Lisbon, the US, other parts of the US, Spain, Austria, just all over the place. But it was amazing. It was such an amazing time, and I even got the opportunity as well, which was phenomenal. We did a project with the United Nations Refugee Council, so UNHCR, and they had a legacy platform which basically in refugee camps, it would do, obviously most people that go there don't have any form of identification. They've got no passport, nothing. And they have all of these shops set up in these refugee camps, and they give every refugee like an allowance. But that allowance is tied biometrically to a form of identification. That was their eye, so their retina. So there was this whole system that was built. They go in, they'd scan their retina, that would obviously look them up and go, right, okay, you can buy this, that, and the other. And they were having massive problems with the way that worked, the latency of the system. It was a bit clunky. And if you can imagine, if you're processing so many refugees, that they haven't got a lot of time basically to do that. So I worked on a project to move that into the cloud, and the impact that had was amazing. But also it meant it drove more workloads. Obviously, from a Microsoft perspective, it was a great success story. But even for the UN agency themselves, it was a massive success story. So we got invited out to a refugee camp in Jordan. So I got to see that like firsthand. And that was absolutely phenomenal, to be able to go around, walk around, see this all being used in real time, and see the impact it had was, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example, isn't it, of Microsoft's mission statement, is it empowering every person and organisation to achieve more. And I think when you look at tech for social impact within Microsoft, that's what it's grounded in, right? It's, yes, we're a technology business or a technology ecosystem as we span out into the partner world, but actually we can use technology to have real world impact, which is what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, exactly that. And there was even not so impressive use cases, but actually the timing was just amazing. And we had an example where there was an agency that had offices globally and needed to simple things like just backup. They just had a really rubbish system in place, and we moved that to the cloud, and we did a pilot in a location in Lebanon, we did it a month before the massive explosion where the tanker blew, or the I can't remember what it was, blew up and basically took it all out. But because we'd done that pilot in that location, that then happened. They went, roll it out globally. So again, just a great example of how that technology and just being in that place at that time and just what it could do. So it was just amazing opportunity. And again, that kind of carried on for another year, did loads of work with them, but started to get more into security. Again, working with the UN over a number of years. Obviously they're constantly under threat from nation state actors, and security to them was one of the biggest challenges that they had. And I did a lot, loads of kind of little engagements and projects, and I ended up working with a company called Born in the Cloud that were mainly kind of doing a load of work out in the US, and I got them involved in a couple of UN engagements. And they're one of their founding partners, a guy called Paul Keeley. I just spoke to him a couple of times, and he said, look, we've been acquired by a company called Open Systems, which is based in Switzerland at the time. He said, well, we want to build out our cloud practice. Why don't you come over and work for us and do what you're good at, I suppose, really, and just kind of apply that sort of methodology. So I took a decision at the end of 2020 to leave Microsoft. So we were still in the depths of COVID. I started at Open Systems at the end of 2020, and just helped them build out their kind of MXDR service, really, which was their entire sort of security operation, but bringing in more of our consultancy team as well to help do that. So if we went into a customer that wasn't the right fit, we could use our consultancy division to kind of get them to where they needed to be in order to get them onboarded to our service. So spent a good couple of years.
Coincided quite closely with Microsoft's own investment in their security stack, and that security, what was I guess a substack of Azure at the time, actually really starting to break out into its whole own solution area within Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly that. So again, at my time at Microsoft, especially on the UN, we did loads of deals around E5 being the kind of new hero SKU and all of the security benefits that brought. We did some kind of really big kind of worldwide deals from a Microsoft perspective with the UN on that, which again is why I started to get really familiar with how it all kind of worked and not only that, the benefits and the value that it brought, especially to huge organizations that were using a plethora of different tooling, all disconnected, no single pane of glass, just a bit of a nightmare and a challenge. So again, when that kind of opportunity came up with Born in the Cloud and the acquisition by Open Systems, I was kind of all over it. So I was like, actually, that's quite an inflection point, really. Security is becoming bigger and bigger. Microsoft really up in their game in that space, and actually, it's a good opportunity to be on the kind of cusp of that security springboard, I suppose, which is exactly where Microsoft are now.
And it sounds like if you look at all of the different moves and inflection points that you've had throughout your career, it sounds like in pretty much all of them, either one or two things have happened. There's been an opportunity where you've thrown your name in the ring, put your hand up, or there's been a relationship with someone that has built that. So I guess, was that strategic from your side, do you think? Do you think it's just nature of how you work and how you operate? How's the career arc been built, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's a bit of all of them, to be honest with you. I think, don't get me wrong, I think there is always sometimes right place, right time. I think, you can't be afraid to ever step outside your comfort zone. You can't be ever afraid to not put your hand up. I've never been like that, and that's always served me really well. I think building relationships in the IT industry has also been probably something that I've learned that quite early on, actually. And also to be very careful with those relationships as well, because unfortunately this industry that we work in is quite incestuous, and you will always come across people again. So I always do my best to, support, challenge, but work with and maintain those relationships throughout my career, because they've always done me really well. And actually, I think if you kind of follow those kind of guiding principles, you'll always do all right in this space. I mean, you've got to have a bit of get up and go as well, and you've got to be prepared to, put a shift in. But I think if you do that, anybody will go quite far in this industry, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings us up to the here and now, effectively. So through Open Systems, grew their sort of security posture, and then in early sort of back end of 2022, moves across to ATEC to sort of grow their security position. Then was it?
Yeah. So in that sort of tail end of that time at Open Systems, we did quite a lot. So again, to your point, the Microsoft security journey was kicking off. We became we're one of the founding partners of MISA, so the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. We got into their funding programs for security. So we were one of the early MSSP program kind of adopters, did really well with that. And then we got nominated for one of the MISA awards, one of the first MISA awards. And we won that. So we won MSSP Partner of the Year. I'm quite vocal on LinkedIn. It's always good. I think it's good. You've got to sort of shout your successes out there. And sort of midway through 2022, Ryan Langley, who's the CEO of ATEC, just pinged me on LinkedIn and said, "Oh, see you doing some really good things at Open Systems. Do you fancy a chat?" I'd never heard of ATEC at this point, so I sort of ummed and ahed about it, and I thought, okay, well, it's worth a conversation. So spoke to Ryan. Ryan's phenomenal. Ryan has been he's been a really good colleague, a boss, and a kind of value him more as a friend now as well. And he said basically what ATEC were trying to do, and at that point they were quite a small UK sort of Microsoft partner, but they just had private equity investment. So he said, look, we're looking to grow the business out. I've got to make some strategic hires. I've got to, we want to invest in the business. We want to basically replicate and build out a security practice similar to what you've just done over at Open Systems. So I ummed and ahed for it over a couple of months, and again, I was thinking of all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, but I was also like, this could actually be quite a good thing. And at that point as well, I was still traveling quite a lot back and forward to kind of Switzerland. So I made the decision to sort of jump ship, go into ATEC, and basically sort of do the same thing again, really, which was take a small partner. And again, it wasn't just me on my own. We brought in a really good alliances manager and a chap called David Craft, who's phenomenal. Great marketing director Elaine and others that we brought into the business. And there was just this laser focus on, we've got to do these things and we're going to do them really, really well. And over the next sort of 2 years, we just literally grew the business really quickly. Again, got ourselves into all those Microsoft programs, got ourselves into MISA, got our SOC MXDR verified. We got nominated for one of the MISA awards quite early on. And unfortunately, we lost it to a US-based company at the time. But again, to be nominated in the top 3 of your industry worldwide, a little company based out of Marlow was quite amazing.
Yeah. What was the position like when you joined then? So obviously they were a Microsoft partner. Were they sort of, I guess, one of those fairly typical, would it be fair to describe, Microsoft partner that do some M365, do some Azure, can do infrastructure migrations to the cloud, do mailbox migrations, licensing, etc., but really not having that specialism or sort of calling card of what they do in the Microsoft space then?
Yeah, so we had that. I mean, at that point they did have some of the partner designations and some of the advanced specializations that they were working on. Yeah. But Ryan always had this kind of ethos that we're going to build the best UK-based Microsoft partner that there is. They weren't managed at that point either. So myself and David quite early on did a lot of kind of courting with Microsoft and showing our willing that we were prepared to kind of ramp that up. We were obviously a CSP sort of tier 1 partner, but there was always this thing that Ryan said to me as well. If we can't build it, we'll do this kind of, we'll buy in other organizations as we see fit to kind of grow that business. So whether we're buying, other companies that provide CSP just to top our CSP up and obviously grow consumption, which is a key thing from a Microsoft metric perspective, or whether it's to buy a capability that we don't have, we'll do that. And in my time there, we bought sort of 4 companies in short succession to kind of grow what we did. But you're right, it was all about trying to build a really good sort of Microsoft player across the whole ecosystem. I focused predominantly on security when I first came in, and building that out and making sure that we had robust sort of professional services offerings. We had a really good SOC and built that team out from sort of scratch, SOC manager and everything else. But then sort of Ryan said to me, actually, I think you'd be good across the piece. I think take what you've done and just apply that across everything. So asked me to sort of step up and become the chief technology officer, which is what I did in 2023, 2024 actually. Sorry, before we got acquired. And then I think because we'd grown so quickly and was doing so well, interest just bubbled up in ATEC. So Ryan said to me one day, our private equity investors are getting interest in the business. It's going to start sale process now. So for that next sort of 6 months, it was all heads down going through that process. And we chatted to lots of private equity companies, but in the end it was IMR, which were the successful bidder, and bought us in October 2024.
Yeah. And what does that acquisition process look like for you in your role as CTO? Because I guess it probably draws a lot of demands away from the day job and actually more into that whole acquisition process, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to say that all acquisitions and mergers go really well, I'd be lying, because initially there were a lot of challenges, but actually more so over the last sort of 3, 4, 5 months, it's started to stabilize a lot more now. But initially, I think there was an idea to kind of smash together everything that IMART had and kind of go to market with one offer. The
Yeah.
problem is I didn't think it wasn't really well understood what every part of the business did. And, IMART at that point had been buying lots of companies. I mean, probably buying a company every year, really, up until that point. But not always integrate them. Systems Up was a great example of back in 2016 or 2015 when they bought them, sorry. They were that was quite cutting edge. And actually, if they'd have really capitalized on it, they could have been a Cloud Direct, they could have been someone huge, but they didn't know what to do with it, so left it on the periphery, and it just kind of carried on on its own way.
Yeah.
So now we're at a bit of an inflection point where we're starting to look at, well, what does it need to look like? But I've always said to our board and Ryan, and Ryan gets it as well, is our focus is on this part of the business, which is how can we help customers leverage the kind of Microsoft ecosystem. How can we make them more secure? How can we optimize what they do in the cloud? How can we make sure that they're leveraging every platform that there is to offer?
Yeah.
And then now chuck that into the mix with what's going on with AI now as well. It's quite an exciting time at the moment. It's just it has been a bit of a kind of a challenge over the last sort of 16 months.
Yeah. And look at that, James. We managed to make it half an hour in without mentioning AI. It's probably the first tech conversation that's managed to do that in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think every other word at the moment is there for everybody.
Yeah. I saw a really funny meme the other day. I think it was someone posted it after the AI tour, actually. And the classic Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, where he's like, "Sell me this pen," and then the guy that's got it, and it just says AI powered.
Yeah.
Every product's got AI in it, but and I guess that's a good sort of segue into getting a bit of vision from your side and from ATEC side in terms of where you're seeing the most demand, where you're seeing the customer trends at the moment. I get the feeling that with a lot of the partners and leaders that I speak to in the space, there's sort of these two really cool parallel conversations going on, which is one on the security side of things, because that links into the whole cloud and M365 and Azure piece for a lot of businesses. And then the other bit is that AI track. How do they get efficiencies and productivity gains through agentic AI, through Copilot? Is that similar to what you're seeing?
Yeah, exactly that. And funny enough, I was again, being sort of part of me, so we get invited every year to the Microsoft Security Airlift, which is over in Redmond. So I was over there in January. And again, that was loads of partners come across. So loads of the partners in the UK were there as well. And it was really interesting to see what Microsoft are focusing on. So you're right, security is very important. But they spent quite a long time talking about actually AI is really starting to pick up momentum, but no one's really thinking about security of it. So Microsoft messaging was very much around treating AI and agents, or whatever you're doing with AI, but treating it as a first person, if that made sense. So making sure that you still apply all the same controls, the same governance that you would do to a normal generic user. You just can't deploy this stuff and trust that it's going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So that was a really big sort of message I took away, that actually AI proliferation is rapidly expanding. So there's an opportunity there, I think, definitely around the security of it. But also on the flip side, to your point as well, I was chatting to Ryan earlier on, actually. I think there's been a lot of noise, even when Copilot first came out.
Yeah.
Was there many use cases for it? Probably not. Now I think we're at an inflection point, and I think the last 3-4 months it's blown me away with what you can do. And I think there's really some well-defined use cases coming out, but also there's huge opportunity for organizations to really leverage it to make them a lot more just provide a lot more sort of better sort of service either to their own customers, or even how we use it internally as an organization. I think one thing I do see a lot though is AI is a buzzword that gets bandied about, and actually the majority of the time it's just simple things like workflows and automation that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing at the moment, especially when we're having customer conversations, is just demystifying AI, I suppose, and just getting people back to, AI isn't going to solve everything. Even simple things, like I said, if it's repeatable tasks, just workflows and automation can do half of that. But I think if you need something to go through a task and then obviously add a layer of like thought or take an input and decide something from that, that's very much where kind of the AI conversation comes in. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of customers that are really starting to see use cases, and I think a lot of that is being driven by the agents now. I think the agent race now is, I mean, Microsoft call it the second wave we're in. So there's multiple waves. The first wave was chat. We're in the second wave now, which is agents, which is basically, allowing agents to act like individuals to do jobs, which is amazing, because then that helps you scale as an organization quite effectively.
I saw the chief AI officer, Microsoft, can't remember his name now, but he posted either today or yesterday again about Copilot tasks, and how that's coming out into sort of preview, and that again feels like another inflection point, isn't it? Which is, rather than just asking for guidance and support search, like you say, for the just Joe Blogs IT user, it's I need you to, here's a sales doc, change it into a perfect PowerPoint presentation for me. And those use cases and those, I guess, examples of where the end user can just use Copilot to do their day job, we're just going to see more and more of those examples coming into the flow, aren't we?
100%. And I mean, they've been working on that for a while, but that's like a competitor to kind of, I don't know if you've heard of OpenClaw, which is like doing the rounds. I mean, that's their version of that. But again, OpenClaw is doing the same thing. It's automating workflows and taking jobs and just doing them for you, which is really powerful. And it makes you even think. I mean, I think about it all the time, and unfortunately I don't really switch off that much, because I'm always constantly looking at what's going on and trying to cut through the noise and see, actually, that could be quite useful, or we should look at that. I'm just amazed at how quickly everything is accelerating, but actually it's removing the barriers to entry as well. I mean, it's unbelievable that you can go into GitHub Copilot, vibe code, and build your own website, build your own application, build a workflow automation, all with natural language, like without any kind of know-how. To being able to kind of run a business technically on your own, having AI support the back end of it. I mean, it's phenomenal, really, where everything is going. And it just, I've got a daughter, she's 12 now, and if I think of what I'm doing now when I was my daughter's age, I mean, this job never existed when I was younger. I just think now, when my daughter's going to be 20, 25, what's she going to be doing? Because it's going to be a completely different industry by that point.
100%. I think the further we go down that AI timeline, I think there's a real possibility that just innovation step just keeps going and going and going, doesn't it? And even if we just rewind the clock 10 years ago and we think about the pace of change that we thought we had with cloud, public cloud and Azure versus, the old server virtualization days, it's like, God, this is moving really quick. We're used to, a new server version every couple of years. Now we're getting features every month. And then you look at AI and you just look at the curve that we've had. It's crazy.
Phenomenal. I mean, I was at Ignite before Christmas, and I went to a session there. I'll argue Ignite is a bit more generalist because obviously the types of audience, but it was a really good session, and it was about quite complex things that you would usually go to a partner for, or you would go and get a consultant in, because they've got the experience, they've done it many times, they understand the caveats and gotchas. And it was basically about looking at an environment, whether it's on premise or private cloud or wherever, and then building a kind of a landing zone design that you would drop that into, but also the cost of that, how would you run it, and how could you optimize it, and then ultimately how could you migrate those workloads over. Now, probably even at this day, and definitely 6 months, a year ago, that would be quite a complex professional services engagement. Microsoft has built like an agent to do that now. So you can literally go into, Azure, which I think will ultimately become a chat interface in time. It won't be a portal with all of it that you see. But you can literally go into an agent and say, right, go and look at my environment over there. Tell me what good needs to look like, and then migrate it for me. It'll just draw the whole thing out for you, tell you how much it's going to cost. If it's too much, okay, well, it's too much money. Okay, I'll wind it down. I'll move bits and pieces over here. I mean, it's just completely crazy. But it also, if I look at us as an MSP and other MSPs out there, it's going to change ultimately what MSPs will be doing in the future as well, because actually the business models of MSPs and systems integrators and value-added resellers up until this point is going to fundamentally change. Like, I think there'll be new offers, there'll be new differentiation, but I think we're at quite an inflection point, really. I think for not only the technology but the industry that supports that technology as well.
Yeah, and how about Security Copilot? Have you guys been able to build that in at ATEC in terms of your security solutions for customers as well?
Yeah, so we've been playing with Security Copilot for a while. One of the initial challenges with Security Copilot, and I openly had this conversation with Microsoft many times, and they understood it as well, was being a managed service provider and going into a customer and saying, we'll manage your security for you, and we'll charge you X amount per user per month. And then also say, well, can you go and buy Security Copilot so that we can make our lives easier? That was a hard kind of challenge, because the way Security Copilot worked in the early days was that it only supported the customer. So the customer would have to buy it and it would have to run in their environment. Obviously, more recently, that's now supporting kind of multi-tenancy, and as a service provider, we can use Copilot on behalf of a customer. But it was still very much a kind of a chat interface. What's been really interesting is over the last sort of 3-4 months, that is pushing heavily into the agent base as well. And actually, we're looking at it at the moment in, like, we do jobs in the SOC, calling jobs to be done. And what of those jobs can we automate? Some of the repetitive, low level, high volume loads. How can we offset that with kind of agents to support that? So, we've been trying in the phishing triage agent, conditional access agent as well was really good that we've been playing with at the moment. So that will look at, security posture of a person and go, actually, we reckon you could tune it even more so and apply this policy and control. And again, those kind of things are phenomenal. There are a lot of other services as well. Again, just in the space we're in, I think you said it right at the start. It's AI companies kind of starting up all over the place, and there are quite a lot of sort of AI agent / security based services that are starting up to support MSPs in what they do. So again, we're at a bit of an inflection point within that ourselves. Do we go down the Security Copilot route fully, or do we look at other AI tooling as well that can support us? Ultimately, it's a race to the bottom a lot of the time in the industry that we're in. There's a lot of competition. Margins are tight. I mean, this year alone, we're a tier 1 CSP. I mean, it's unbelievable CSPs, the costs and margins that are being driven. Yeah. So it's all about doing more for less, but being able to make sure you tune that as much as you can. So again, we're at a bit of an inflection point ourselves of which route we go down and how do we do it, and where do we invest, where do we pull back from, and where do we maybe even specialize more in. So that's, again, something that we're actively talking about as we go into budgeting for next year as well.
Yeah, the juggling balls that you're trying to keep up and decide which one to catch, right?
I mean, you can't be it's hard because you can't be a jack of all trades because you'll be an expert at nothing. And what we're trying to do at the moment is, we want to offer all of our capabilities to all of our customers, and we'll continue to do that. But where do we want to go deeper, and and how deep do we want to go, and how can we differentiate ourselves in the market so that actually, when you're talking to Microsoft or you're talking to whoever, our name comes to the top of the list. So that's actively what we're working on at the moment. And I think a lot of that will be backed by AI as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for giving us a bit of a whistle-stop tour, James, on the life and times of James Pearse and your career, and obviously now at ATEC, what that looks like for you guys. I always like to end the podcast with Microsoft Mentors quickfire round.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Cool. So, for yourself, are you a strategist at heart or a technologist at heart?
strategist, I would say.
Yeah. When it comes to techies and people that you work with, people in your teams, etc., do you think there's more value in certifications or real world experience?
Real world experience every day.
Yeah. Remote working or working in the office energy?
Working in the office. Yeah, definitely working in the office.
Cool. I like this one. It's always like to see what people pull out of the grey matter for this one. What is either your favourite Microsoft product or Microsoft suite of products of all time?
I'd have to say E5 Security. I think that's the value you get from it and what it can help consolidate is, very, very powerful.
Yeah, cool. Personal devices, laptops, Mac or Windows?
I'd have to say I'm very much a Mac fanboy, but I do have a Windows Surface, so yeah.
Yeah. There's don't worry, mate. There's lots of covert Mac users in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm flushing them all out with that question. Like personally, in terms of either leadership or technology, have you got a go-to book, author, podcast that you like to dive into?
No, not really. I mean, I'm quite interested in all sorts of different sort of authors, but I do like to focus a lot on the security side, and I've read some really good books, like This Is How They Say the World's Going to End, which is an amazing book around like cybersecurity threats, but also nation states buying those and obviously selling them to the highest bidder. But I think a lot of my experience, as I said before, and a lot of things I've learned off people I've worked with, and had the pleasure to kind of work with as well. So I tend to kind of stay closer to home than kind of go more, I suppose, aspirational, I suppose, is the answer to that question.
Yeah. And final one, it's Friday night. It's been a long week at work. What's the go-to Pearse family takeaway?
Oh, good. I live in the middle of nowhere, which means that you can't really get takeaway very easy. But if I could, it'd be
join the club, mate. Mine's the same.
It'd be a curry. It would be an Indian, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm lucky that there's two places that deliver to me. One is a very bad pizza place that we never get anything from, and the other is a curry house that does deliver to our house in the countryside. So that is always our go-to as well.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time, James. As always, I'll tag James, I'll tag ATEC in the podcast so that you can come and find him. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, mate.
Thank you so much. Cheers for the time, Ollie.
Catch you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Hopefully you enjoyed this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Whether you listen to us on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever else you listen to your podcast, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe. Both myself, Ollie Ridley, on LinkedIn, our guests, and also the podcast. The more people that we know are listening, the more time and investment we can make into the podcast and bring more conversations with our Microsoft mentors and leaders from across the Microsoft partner ecosystem to our community. In the meantime, stay tuned and keep an eye out for next week's episode.